Welcome to our deep dive today. We're traveling back to the early days of Christianity to explore excerpts from the book of 2 John, this short letter, penned by the elder, who many scholars believe to be the Apostle John, provides an intriguing look at the challenges faced by early Christian communities. Imagine navigating theological disputes and figuring out who to trust in those formative years.
It really sets the stage for understanding the development of Christian thought, doesn't it? This letter, addressed to an elect lady and her children, likely a specific church community, offers a window into their world.
It's fascinating how the letter starts with thanksgiving and quickly shifts to a warning about deceivers. It makes you wonder what was going on that prompted such a strong reaction.
The elder's joy at finding some members living according to the truth highlights the importance of aligning actions with beliefs, a concept central to their faith. But then he warns about those who don't confess Jesus as Christ coming in the flesh. This was a defining belief for early Christians, setting them apart from other Jewish sects and those influenced by Greco-Roman philosophies.
It seems like this seemingly simple statement held a lot of weight in their understanding of Jesus.
Absolutely. Early Christianity faced numerous theological challenges, with different interpretations of Jesus' nature and mission emerging. This passage highlights the importance of discerning true teachings from those that deviated from this core belief.
And he doesn't mince words, calling these individuals the deceiver and the antichrist. It's intense language that underscores the seriousness of their deviation.
It demonstrates the perceived threat these alternative teachings pose to the early church. Remember, for them, this wasn't just an intellectual debate, it was a matter of spiritual survival.
And then there's the strong instruction not to receive anyone who doesn't bring this teaching into their homes or even greet them. To modern ears, that sounds extreme. It seems to clash with the message of love and inclusivity we often associate with Christianity.
It's important to remember the historical context. Early Christian communities faced intense persecution and opposition. Their strong reaction was likely a way to protect their fledgling faith from what they perceived as dangerous influences. To understand this directive, we need to delve into the specific challenges they were up against.
So it wasn't necessarily about promoting intolerance, but about safeguarding their community and their understanding of truth during a very vulnerable time.
Precisely. This intense commitment also highlights the critical role of personal relationships in shaping their faith. The elder explicitly expresses a desire for face-to-face interaction, stating he has more to say, but prefers to speak in person rather than through writing.
This makes me think about how, even today, despite having countless ways to connect digitally, we still crave that in-person connection, especially when discussing deeply held beliefs.
That's a great observation. It speaks to the power of personal relationships in strengthening faith and navigating complex issues. Remember, this was long before social media or widespread literacy. Face-to-face interaction was their primary means of communication, teaching, and community building.
The letter concludes with a reading from The Children of Your Elect Sister, suggesting another church sending their love and support. It's a beautiful reminder that even amidst these theological struggles, they found strength in their interconnectedness.
It highlights that these early Christian communities weren't isolated. They were part of a larger network, relying on each other for encouragement and guidance. This sense of community was crucial, especially when facing external pressures and internal disagreements. This idea of truth residing within believers is central to the letter and seems to be tied to their concept of the Holy Spirit.
Yes. He mentions that truth will reside in them forever, which is a really intriguing concept. Can you unpack that a bit more for us? How does this idea of truth being tied to the Holy Spirit factor into their understanding?
That's where it gets really interesting. For them, truth wasn't merely factual accuracy. It was intertwined with the Holy Spirit dwelling within them. They saw the Holy Spirit as the source of truth, guiding them and revealing God's will. It was more like an internal compass, shaped by their understanding of Jesus.
So their understanding of truth goes beyond just intellectual knowledge or facts. It's about an internal alignment with the Holy Spirit, guided by their understanding of Jesus. That makes you wonder how they might have applied this concept when encountering these deceivers the elder warns about.
That's a key question. Their approach to truth wasn't passive. It was about actively discerning and testing what they heard against this internal compass, shaped by the Holy Spirit and their understanding of Jesus' teachings. Remember, they believed the Holy Spirit resided within them, guiding them toward truth.
So it wasn't just blindly accepting what someone claimed as truth. They were actively evaluating it. against their internal understanding, informed by the Holy Spirit and the teachings of Jesus. That raises the question of who these deceivers might have been. The text doesn't give specifics, but were there any prominent figures or movements at that time that might fit this description?
While 2 John doesn't name specific groups, we know from other early Christian writings that several movements presented challenges. One group was the Docetists. They believed that Jesus' physical body was an illusion and that he only appeared human. This belief directly contradicted the core Christian belief that Jesus was both fully God and fully human. Denying Jesus' humanity undermined their understanding of his sacrifice and resurrection.
So for the early Christians, the physical reality of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection was central to their faith, the Docetists. By denying this physicality, we're striking at the very heart of their belief system.
Exactly. Another group causing concern was the Gnostics. They believed that salvation came through secret knowledge, or gnosis, accessible only to a select few. This idea clashed with the early Christian emphasis on the gospel message being available to everyone.
It seems like these Gnostics were creating an exclusive, hierarchical system of belief, which ran counter to the early Christian idea of a faith, open to all, regardless of background or social standing.
You're hitting on a key point there. These early deceivers,
Okay.
whether Docetists, Gnostics, or others, represented challenges not only to specific doctrines, but also to the fundamental nature of the early Christian movement. Their teachings threatened to fracture the community and dilute the core message.
No wonder the elder felt compelled to issue such a strong warning and such seemingly harsh instructions. He saw these teachings as potentially undermining the very foundation of their faith.
And remember, these communities were still quite young and vulnerable, facing persecution and opposition from both Jewish and Roman authorities. Protecting the integrity of their faith was paramount.
It makes you appreciate the challenges they faced in defining and defending their beliefs, in a world where Christianity was still a new and often misunderstood movement. It also raises the question of how this historical context can inform our understanding of the elders' instruction, to not even greet those spreading different teachings. It seems so contrary to the modern emphasis on dialogue and understanding different viewpoints.
It's crucial to remember the difference between tolerating harmful or destructive ideas and engaging in respectful dialogue with those who hold differing perspectives. The elders' instruction likely stemmed from a deep concern for the spiritual well-being of the community and a desire to protect them from what he perceived as dangerous influences. While their methods might seem extreme to us today, it's important to consider their motivation and the context in which they were operating.
It's like that old saying, desperate times call for desperate measures. They were fighting for the survival of their faith and community. But even in this context of strong warnings and boundaries, the elder emphasizes the importance of personal interaction. He wants to speak face to face, not just rely on written communication.
That's such an important point. It suggests that even in dealing with these theological disagreements, he recognized the power of personal connection. Face-to-face interactions allow for deeper understanding, empathy, and the possibility of reconciliation.
It reminds us that even amidst strong disagreements, it's crucial to maintain open lines of communication and strive for understanding.
Absolutely. And this emphasis on personal connection also speaks to the human need for belonging, which was especially crucial for these early Christians, who were often marginalized and persecuted. Their faith communities provided a sense of identity, support, and belonging.
This reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about truth being more than just factual accuracy for them. It was tied to the Holy Spirit and their understanding of Jesus. Could you expand on that a bit more? How can we connect that concept to our own lives today?
That's a fantastic question. This idea that truth is intertwined with the Holy Spirit and shaped by our understanding of Jesus suggests that it's not just an external concept we acquire, but something that's cultivated within us. It's about aligning our lives with the teachings and example of Jesus. And for the early Christians, this wasn't just an intellectual exercise. It was about living out their faith in a tangible way.
So it's not just about knowing the right answers, but about living a life that reflects those truths.
Exactly. It's about aligning our actions with our beliefs and letting our faith guide our choices and interactions with the world.
I think that's a message that resonates even today, don't you?
Absolutely. In a world saturated with information and competing narratives, it's more important than ever to cultivate that internal compass, guided by our deepest values and beliefs.
So even though we might not face the same threats as the early Christians, we still face the challenge of discerning truth and living in alignment with our values. But the question remains, how do we navigate this process of discernment In a world that's arguably even more complex and challenging than the one they faced, it can feel overwhelming at times, right? Trying to sift through all the information and differing perspectives we encounter daily. It makes the elders' warning about deceivers feel surprisingly relevant, even though the specific threats might have changed. How can we apply their approach to discerning truth to our modern context?
That's the million-dollar question. While we might not face the same threats of persecution, the need for discernment is perhaps even more crucial today. We're bombarded with information from countless sources, each vying for our attention, often presenting conflicting narratives. It's easy to feel lost in the noise.
It's like we need to develop that internal compass the early Christians relied on, guided by our core values and beliefs. But how do we do that in a world where everything seems up for debate?
It starts with being intentional about the information we consume. We need to be critical thinkers, questioning sources, considering biases, and looking for evidence-based perspectives. It's also crucial to cultivate a healthy skepticism, not blindly accepting everything we hear or read, even if it aligns with our pre-existing beliefs.
So it's about engaging with information actively, not just passively absorbing it, almost like we're detectives, searching for clues, to help us piece together a more accurate understanding of the world around us.
I love that analogy. It highlights the importance of being active participants. In our own learning and understanding, we need to be willing to ask tough questions, challenge assumptions, and even be open to changing our minds when presented with compelling evidence.
That openness to changing our minds can be tough, though, especially when we're dealing with deeply held beliefs. It feels almost counterintuitive to embrace that kind of uncertainty.
I understand that feeling. But I think true growth, both intellectually and spiritually, often requires us to step outside our comfort zones and be open to new perspectives. It doesn't mean abandoning our core values, but rather being willing to refine and deepen our understanding as we encounter new information and engage with differing viewpoints.
This brings us back to the elders' desire for face-to-face interaction. Maybe that personal connection is key to navigating these complex conversations about truth and belief.
Absolutely. While technology allows us to connect with people worldwide, there's something powerful about engaging in person. We can read body language, hear tone of voice, and have those nuanced conversations that are often lost in digital communication.
It's like that in-person connection creates a space for vulnerability and empathy, which are essential for building trust and understanding.
Precisely. And remember, the early Christians were dealing with intense disagreements, even to the point of excluding those who held differing views. Yet the elders still emphasized the importance of personal interaction.
It suggests that even in the midst of conflict, there's value in seeking face-to-face dialogue. It might not always lead to agreement, but it can foster a deeper understanding of where the other person's coming from and potentially bridge some of those divides.
And perhaps that's one of the most enduring lessons we can glean from 2 John. In a world that often feels increasingly polarized, remembering the power of personal connection, empathy, and respectful dialogue is crucial. These are the tools that can help us navigate the complex landscape of truth and belief, even when faced with challenging or opposing viewpoints.
As we wrap up our deep dive into 2 John, that message of connection and dialogue feels particularly resonant. It's a reminder that even though times have changed, the human heart's search for truth and connection remains a constant. So for our listeners, we leave you with this final thought. How can you cultivate that internal compass, guided by your values and beliefs, as you navigate the complexities of the world around you? And how can you use personal connection and dialogue to bridge divides and foster understanding, even when faced with differing perspectives?